Racist cop demands ID from black billionaire. The response leaves him speechless. Prepare yourself for a roller coaster of drama, power, and swift karmic justice. In this gripping tale, an unsuspecting police officer makes a catastrophic mistake when he demands ID from a black woman, unaware she's one of the richest, most influential figures in the country. The tension escalates when his prejudice blinds him to the truth, dragging both of them into a public showdown that will leave you speechless. Will ignorance and hate triumph, or will justice and the billionaire's undeniable force prevail? Keep watching to uncover how one woman's dignity, resourcefulness, and the power of her name trigger a reckoning for the ages. The day dawned bright and brisk in Chicago. Spring had arrived in the Windy City, coaxing people out of their homes to enjoy coffee shop strolls and scenic walks by Lake Michigan. The birds were in high spirits, flitting among budding trees, while cyclists sped along the bike paths to get their morning exercise. Chicago was a tapestry of diverse neighborhoods, each one carrying its own pulse and energy. To anyone passing by, the morning hustle seemed ordinary. Cars jammed on Lakeshore Drive, office workers piling into the Loop, tourists snapping photos near Millennium Park. But for one woman, this day would mark a crossroads of epic proportions, a day that would test her resilience and moral fortitude in ways she never anticipated. At precisely 8:02 a.m., Dr. Imani Harper was chauffeured to a discreet entrance of the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. The doorman recognized her, offering a warm greeting. She acknowledged him graciously. She always made it a point to learn the names of the staff. Dr. Harper was not just your average high-profile figure. She was a self-made billionaire and an acclaimed research scientist who had turned her groundbreaking biotech discoveries into a global empire. For many, her image was that of a quiet magnate, philanthropic, but rarely in the public eye outside scheduled appearances. However, behind this reserved persona lay a fierce determination that had propelled her from modest beginnings to the pinnacles of power. She had traveled to Chicago from her main office in Silicon Valley for a critical meeting involving her new charitable foundation. Rumor had it she was collaborating with Feeding America to launch a tech-based initiative aiming to optimize food distribution networks in underserved communities. The project was her passion, driven by a personal desire to eradicate food insecurity. She had grown up knowing firsthand the impact of empty kitchen cupboards. That morning, Dr. Harper stepped out of her black Bentley in a simple yet elegant outfit, dark denim, a fitted blazer, and low heels. She'd chosen not to dress in the usual glam that people might expect from someone who graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. Sometimes, in the swirl of her massive philanthropic responsibilities, Dr. Harper preferred comfort. From her vantage point, she spotted a Chicago Police Department cruiser parked curbside near the hotel. Nothing unusual, she thought. Chicago PD cars often lingered around high-end hotels, providing security or running routine checks. She walked through the hotel's glass doors and moved toward the conference room, mind already spinning with philanthropic ideas. But fate would soon intervene, setting events into motion that would test every fiber of her being. The meeting concluded around noon, more successful than she could have hoped. Senior officials from Feeding America and a few city council members had committed to the first wave of the plan. Spirits were high. As Dr. Harper checked her phone, she saw a flurry of emails congratulating her. She smiled to herself. It felt good to see the dream of better food distribution systems taking root. To clear her mind before the next round of discussions, Dr. Harper decided on a quick walk. She dismissed her chauffeur for the afternoon, not wanting to be pampered every second of the day. The Bentley would remain parked in the hotel's underground garage. Stepping out onto East Pearson Street, she inhaled the crisp wind that Chicago was known for. She loved the city's gritty charm, its music, its art, and above all, its resilience. As she made her way toward a small cafe recommended by the hotel staff, she did her best to blend into the crowd. Her face was recognizable to some, especially among philanthropic circles, but she rarely garnered paparazzi-level attention outside scheduled media events. Dressed simply, hair in a neat chignon, Dr. Harper looked like any other professional heading to grab a quick bite. About 2 blocks from the cafe, her phone buzzed. It was an update from a philanthropic partner about an upcoming fundraiser. She paused by the sidewalk near a row of parked cars to type out a response. Suddenly, a harsh voice sliced through the urban din. "Hey! You, ma'am. What are you doing there?" She lifted her gaze to see a uniformed police officer stepping out of a patrol car. His name tag read, Officer Remington. He was tall, broad-chested, and wore the authoritative stance typical of law enforcement. But something in his eyes made Dr. Harper uneasy, a hardness, a certain hostility. She lowered her phone. "Just checking my messages, officer. Is there a problem?" "Can I see some ID?" he demanded, ignoring her question. Startled, she blinked. Why do you need my ID? I'm just standing here using my phone." Officer Remington sneered, taking a step closer. "Is that your car?" He jerked his chin at a silver SUV parked a few feet away. She shook her head calmly. "No, it's not. I'm just walking, sir." He narrowed his eyes, scanning her appearance, as if looking for something suspicious. "We got a report of suspicious activity. Someone matching your description was loitering around parked cars, possibly looking to break in." Her eyebrows shot up. She glanced around. The sidewalk was moderately busy, and a few people looked on, uncertain whether to intervene or keep their distance. "I haven't done anything. I'm here for a conference at the Ritz-Carlton." "I stepped out to get a sandwich," she said, striving to remain composed. "Is that illegal?" "Ma'am, I'm not going to repeat myself. Hand over your ID," he said. His tone was cold, with a simmering aggression that made it clear he wasn't merely following routine protocol. An uneasy knot formed in her stomach. Dr. Harper wasn't naive. She had encountered subtle and sometimes overt acts of racism throughout her life. While she respected law enforcement, she also understood that abuse of power happened. With measured politeness, she reached into her blazer pocket for her ID. When she offered her driver's license, Officer Remington snatched it, giving it barely a glance before asking another question. "What brings you to this neighborhood, Miss Harper?" She stiffened at the blatant hostility. "As I said, I'm a guest at the Ritz-Carlton for a charitable conference. You can verify my room reservation if needed." He made a show of scanning her ID again. "Yeah, I might just do that." "Why don't you stand right here?" By now, a trickle of bystanders had slowed, sensing the tension. Some discreetly filmed the exchange with their phones. Dr. Harper noticed but maintained her calm. This was not the time for an outburst, though anger flared within her. She was the keynote speaker at a charitable summit, a billionaire, and a major contributor to philanthropic causes around the nation. But to this officer, none of that mattered. She was, in his eyes, a suspect. Remington radioed in, apparently checking her background. Dr. Harper knew he would find nothing. She didn't even have a speeding ticket on her record. Still, the vulnerability of standing on a public street, being interrogated by a cop who clearly harbored prejudice, set her pulse racing. Moments later, the static of the police radio crackled back. The dispatch officer said something that caused Remington's posture to stiffen. His expression darkened, and he returned his gaze to Dr. Harper. In a low, gruff voice, he said, "We'll see about this. Don't move." She wanted to assert her rights, to demand he return her license, but a small voice inside urged caution. This was not just about her. Any public scandal involving her name could overshadow her philanthropic efforts or scare away potential donors. She had to handle this deliberately and gracefully. Remington kept a close eye on her as he spoke urgently into his radio again, evidently not satisfied with the all clear. Dr. Harper overheard scraps of his conversation. Suspicious, possibly forging ID, might need to take her in for questioning. Yes, I'll call it in. The casual disregard in his tone made her stomach twist. Finally, Remington walked back, ID still in his hand. "You're coming with me to the station. We need to confirm a few things," he said sharply. She took a measured breath. "On what grounds, officer? Am I being detained or arrested?" He pursed his lips, clearly annoyed by her calm, well-structured questions. We have reason to believe you were casing cars in the area. That's probable cause to bring you in." Dr. Harper was astounded at the boldness of the lie. She had done nothing except pause on a public sidewalk to check her phone. Before she could protest, a second squad car pulled up. 2 more officers stepped out, Officers Patel and Martinez. They approached cautiously, uncertain about the situation they were walking into. Remington waved them closer. "We've got ourselves a suspect for potential theft in progress," he announced, voice dripping with self-importance. Patel and Martinez glanced at Dr. Harper, then at Remington, clearly puzzled. Patel spoke first. "We got the call. Are you sure we need to bring her in?" She gave Dr. Harper a quick once-over, noticing her poise, her expensive attire, the way she seemed far from the typical suspect in a petty car theft. Remington's jaw clenched. "Yes, I'm sure," he snapped. "She was loitering around these vehicles, and the station said we should confirm her ID." He held up Dr. Harper's license as if it were a counterfeit bill. Patel turned to Dr. Harper. "Ma'am, do you have any paperwork to confirm your hotel reservation? Perhaps a business card or something?" Dr. Harper nodded, relieved to speak to an officer who at least sounded civil. "In my phone, I have my digital hotel booking confirmation. Or we could walk 2 blocks to the Ritz-Carlton, and the front desk staff can confirm my identity. I have no issue with that." However, before Patel could reply, Remington cut in. "We do this by the book. She's coming in." He reached for Dr. Harper's arm to handcuff her, and the crowd audibly gasped. Phones were raised higher, capturing the moment. A few onlookers shouted in protest. Dr. Harper pulled back slightly, her voice trembling with anger. "Officer, there's no need for handcuffs. I'm not resisting. I'm willing to go to the station if you insist, but you're making a mistake." Martinez, who had been quiet until now, tried to interject. "Remington, maybe we can—" "Back off, Martinez," Remington barked. "I've got this under control." He fastened one cuff around Dr. Harper's wrist. Anger, humiliation, and fear collided in Dr. Harper's chest. She saw the camera phones capturing every second. Her philanthropic brand, her entire public image, while not the primary concern in a moral sense, flashed before her eyes. She had worked her entire life to uplift marginalized communities. Yet here she was, being handcuffed on the street as a suspect, her skin color turning her into a target. Gathering her voice, she announced firmly for the crowd's benefit, "I am Dr. Imani Harper. I'm in Chicago to work with Feeding America. I have no criminal record. This is a wrongful detention." But Remington ignored her. The click of the second cuff locking into place reverberated like a thunderclap through her mind. Dr. Harper was ushered into the back seat of the squad car. Through the tinted windows, she saw the other officers exchanging anxious looks. It was clear not all of them were comfortable with Remington's heavy-handed approach, yet none openly challenged him. At the station, the fluorescent lights and sterile grey walls only intensified her sense of disorientation. She was fingerprinted, her personal belongings, including her phone, taken away. The entire process felt surreal, like a scene out of a documentary on wrongful arrests. Remington glanced at her, an air of smugness around him. "We'll see how legit your story is," he said. "We've had people claim to be all kinds of big shots." Dr. Harper bit back her retort. She knew that losing her temper wouldn't help. Instead, she waited until she was given a seat in a small interrogation room. There, the tension seemed to condense into a suffocating cloud. The door remained open, the corridor bustling with uniformed cops passing by. Officer Patel soon entered, carefully shutting the door behind her. She sat across from Dr. Harper. "I'm sorry about the circumstances. My partner is a bit— well, he takes certain calls quite seriously. Could you give me any additional proof of who you are and what you do in Chicago?" Dr. Harper cleared her throat. "If you'd look in my purse, which I believe is in your evidence locker, you'll find business cards for the Harper Global Foundation. I also have a pass for the philanthropic conference in the main pocket. This is a huge mistake." Patel nodded sympathetically. "Let me see what I can do." She retrieved Dr. Harper's personal items from the evidence room. Within minutes, Patel was staring at Dr. Harper's gold-embossed business card, clearly not something one prints at home. The Harper Global Foundation had the word Billionaire attached to Dr. Harper's name in countless magazine profiles over the years. Realization dawned in Patel's eyes. "Oh my gosh, Dr. Harper, I've heard about your philanthropic work," she said, her voice losing its formal edge. "You funded the new children's wing at the University of Chicago Medical Center, right?" Dr. Harper nodded. "Yes, and we're currently working to establish partnerships with local organizations to reduce hunger. Look, officer, I am not here to cause trouble. This is a wrongful detention. My civil liberties have been violated." Patel's face flushed. She stepped out of the interrogation room to confer with Martinez. Meanwhile, Remington walked by and smirked in Dr. Harper's direction. He had not yet looked at her business card or hotel reservation details. He seemed determined to treat her like a criminal no matter what. From the bits of conversation that filtered in from the hallway, Dr. Harper overheard Patel and Martinez telling Remington that they needed to release her. "She's legit. She's Dr. Harper, Harper Global, feeding programs, biotech breakthroughs. For crying out loud, she's probably one of the biggest philanthropic voices in the country," Martinez was saying, voice laced with frustration. Remington scoffed. "I'll believe it when I see official verification from someone high up. She could have an elaborate setup. Scammers get better every day." Patel let out an exasperated sigh. "This is borderline harassment, Remington. Let's call the hotel. Let's confirm with the charity organizers. We have enough to clear her." A tense moment followed. Then Remington grumbled something inaudible, grabbed his radio, and walked off. Minutes ticked by, and Dr. Harper remained in the stuffy interrogation room, steeling herself for the next wave of injustice. She refused to be humiliated any further. She knew she had to use her clout carefully. Her public image might come into play, but she was determined that no one, however powerful or racist, could strip her of her dignity. Then, like a ray of sunshine piercing storm clouds, her phone was returned to her. Patel handed it over, apologizing profusely, explaining that she had personally verified Dr. Harper's credentials via multiple calls. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder to ensure Remington wasn't within earshot. "Thank you, Officer Patel," Dr. Harper said, her tone carefully controlled. "Now, if you don't mind, I have a lawyer to call as well as some phone calls to make. I assume I'm free to do that, correct?" Her question held a challenging edge. Patel nodded hurriedly. "Yes, absolutely. Please do." She exited the room, leaving the door partially ajar. Dr. Harper wasted no time. She scrolled through her contacts, found her personal attorney's direct line, and pressed call. The attorney, Cassandra Liu, answered almost immediately. "Imani," she said, using Dr. Harper's first name as they were long-time acquaintances. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, I'm at a police station in Chicago being wrongfully detained." She recapped the incident in succinct detail. Attorney Liu's voice was taut with anger. "Stay put. I'm calling the precinct right now. Then I'm contacting the media if they don't release you. This is an egregious violation." Dr. Harper exhaled, relief coursing through her. "Thank you." As she ended the call, she noticed a text from Michael Gray, the CEO of Feeding America, whom she'd informed of her trip. Another text from a city council member, all offering congratulations on the meeting's success earlier that morning. With a few taps, Dr. Harper composed a brief message to Gray. "Need your assistance at the 14th District Station. Wrongly detained by CPD. Please verify my identity ASAP." She hesitated before hitting send. Part of her dreaded the media fiasco that might ensue, but she had been left with no other choice. Within 15 minutes, the phone in the interrogation room rang. "Doctor," Harper answered, hearing Gray's frantic voice on the other end. "Imani, I can't believe this. Are you okay?" "I've got the station's watch commander on the other line. We'll straighten this out. Just hang tight." She thanked him, hung up, and glanced toward the open door. She could hear a commotion in the main office area, voices raised, phone lines buzzing. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Curiosity piqued, Dr. Harper stood and walked into the hallway. Officer Patel, Martinez, and a few other officers were engaged in heated discussions. Meanwhile, Officer Remington lurked in a corner, arms folded, jaw clenched. When he noticed Dr. Harper's approach, his eyes darkened. Patel stepped over to Dr. Harper, trying to smile reassuringly. "Dr. Harper, I just spoke with the watch commander. We're finalizing paperwork to release you. I can't apologize enough for—" Her sentence was interrupted by the watch commander himself, Captain Jones, emerging from his office. He was a tall, imposing figure, but his expression was one of dismay and concern. "Dr. Harper, on behalf of the Chicago Police Department, please accept my sincere apology for this mishandling. We've verified your identification and credentials, and you're free to go. Rest assured, this matter will be investigated thoroughly." Behind the captain, Remington glowered, clearly resentful of the apology taking place in front of the entire station. Dr. Harper met the officer's glare with unwavering eyes. She was not looking for vengeance at that moment, just her freedom, yet she knew the story wouldn't end here. She turned to Captain Jones, chin held high. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your apology, but I expect an investigation, and I intend to speak with my legal counsel about what happened." Jones nodded gravely. "Understood. We will fully cooperate." Her release from custody felt surreal. Even though it had been only a few hours, the emotional toll was staggering, but she was not leaving quietly. Before stepping outside the station, Dr. Harper addressed Patel one last time. "Officer Patel, you treated me with respect once you realized the facts. I appreciate that. I hope you'll ensure your colleagues uphold the same standard for everyone in the future." Patel nodded, her cheeks flushed. "I will, Dr. Harper." Leaving the station, Dr. Harper's eyes squinted at the bright afternoon sun. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Bystanders, local community members, a smattering of press, alerted by rumors of the incident. Their camera shutters clicked furiously as Dr. Harper emerged. She felt a wave of conflicting emotions, embarrassment, anger, relief, and a flicker of empowerment. The story, no doubt, was about to go viral. With determined steps, she walked to the Blacktown car her attorney, Cassandra Liu, had arranged. Cassandra stood by, phone in hand, evidently finishing a heated conversation with someone at City Hall. Dr. Harper slid into the back seat, and Cassandra followed. "We need to get ahead of this story," Cassandra said. "I've already briefed some media outlets that you were wrongly detained. However, if we publicize it too heavily, it might overshadow your philanthropic work." "What's your stance?" Dr. Harper hesitated, then spoke firmly. "I want the public to know the truth. This sort of racial profiling is unacceptable, and it happens too often to people who don't have the resources or platform I do. Let's make sure this goes on record, but we won't sensationalize it. I want justice, not just attention." Cassandra nodded. "Agreed. I'll draft a statement and coordinate with your PR team. Also, I'll be filing a formal complaint against Officer Remington and the department." "Doctor?" Harper stared out the window as the car began to move. Her mind flashed through the humiliating moments in the station, the coldness in Remington's eyes, the camera phones capturing her in handcuffs. But for the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a surge of determination. Yes, she was a billionaire, a titan of industry and philanthropy, but more importantly, she was a black woman, and she refused to stand idly by while a member of law enforcement abused his authority. She would fight back, not merely for herself, but for every person who'd been profiled or mistreated without recourse. News traveled faster than Dr. Harper could have imagined. The next morning, multiple media outlets featured coverage of her wrongful detention. Local headlines read, "Philanthropist billionaire detained by CPD," and "Chicago PD under fire for alleged racial profiling of Dr. Imani Harper." Determined to use the momentum for positive change, Dr. Harper, with Cassandra's guidance, organized a small press conference on the steps of City Hall. Officials from Feeding America, community leaders, and even some city council members who admired her philanthropic work attended. She stood at the podium, cameras whirring, reporters jostling for position. Dressed in a charcoal grey pantsuit, Dr. Harper exuded calm authority. Her voice, though measured, carried conviction as it projected through the microphone. Yesterday, I experienced an incident that too many black Americans face routinely, being treated as a suspect simply because of my appearance. I'm grateful for the officers who ultimately respected the truth, but it doesn't erase the humiliating and unjust nature of the initial profiling. I stand here not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been subjected to discrimination by those sworn to protect us. The crowd listened, rapt. She went on to detail her philanthropic endeavors, her commitment to Chicago's communities, and how this incident would fuel her determination to support police reform initiatives. There was a hush when she concluded with, "I'm not asking for special treatment because of my wealth or status. I'm demanding basic human rights and dignity that should be afforded to every citizen, regardless of their background." The press conference was about to end when a reporter piped up, "Dr. Harper, do you plan to press charges or file a civil suit against Officer Remington or the Chicago Police Department?" A flicker of resolve lit her eyes. "I have filed a formal complaint. My legal team is reviewing all options, including civil action. But above all, I aim to work with the city to implement better training and oversight so this never happens to someone else." Applause and shouts of support rose from the assembly. The cameras panned over a crowd that included local activists and supporters holding signs that read, "Stop racial profiling" and "Justice for all." It was a powerful moment that wove Dr. Harper's personal ordeal into the broader fabric of a community demanding change. Behind the scenes, the wheels of justice and departmental accountability began to turn. Once Dr. Harper's formal complaint was filed, Captain Jones initiated an internal affairs investigation. Officer Remington was placed on temporary desk duty pending the outcome. Public pressure mounted. City council members, activists, and media outlets demanded transparency. Within days, evidence surfaced that Officer Remington had a troubling track record. Several formal complaints had been lodged against him over the years, mostly from people of color alleging harassment or excessive force. Most of these complaints had mysteriously disappeared into the labyrinthine bureaucracy, but with Dr. Harper's case under scrutiny, a thorough review came to light. It appeared that Remington had repeatedly skirted discipline due to either departmental favoritism or insufficient evidence to move forward. Now, with the eyes of the press and city officials laser-focused on his conduct, the prior complaints were re-evaluated. Accounts of Remington brandishing his authority unnecessarily and using racist language off-duty soon emerged. Fellow officers began stepping forward, sharing that they had witnessed microaggressions and occasional threats from Remington, but had feared retaliation. With Dr. Harper's high-profile complaint fueling momentum, people felt safer telling the truth. The internal affairs investigators compiled a damning dossier. Remington's future in the Chicago Police Department hung in the balance. The departmental union tried to intervene, but the weight of the evidence proved too massive. City Hall, spurred by Dr. Harper's unwavering stance and the resultant media attention, also began pressing for an expedited review. Meanwhile, Dr. Harper maintained a delicate balance between her philanthropic schedule and the legal side of the case. She continued to meet with Feeding America and other NGOs to push her hunger relief initiative forward. In every interview or press statement, she reiterated that this was not a personal vendetta. This was about systemic reform. As investigations deepened, Dr. Harper announced something unprecedented. She pledged a sizable donation to create a new program for the Chicago PD, an initiative focusing on racial sensitivity training, mental health support, and community engagement projects. The donation was contingent upon structural reforms within the department, including mandatory diversity and de-escalation training. Reactions were mixed. Some activists criticized the idea of giving more money to a department with a history of misconduct, but others saw it as a chance to pave a constructive path forward. At a follow-up press event, Dr. Harper stood beside Captain Jones, several city council members, and leaders from community organizations. She stated clearly, "I'm investing in solutions. It's not enough to punish individual officers if we don't address the root causes of racial bias. This program, if implemented properly, can be a step toward meaningful change." The City Council applauded the idea, drafting preliminary agreements that included independent oversight committees and transparent channels for citizen complaints. Though far from a complete solution, it was progress. Meanwhile, Officer Remington's fate would soon be decided. Word circulated that the Internal Affairs report was nearly complete. Even high-ranking officials in the department seemed poised to make an example of him. In corners of Chicago's police fraternity, frustration brewed. Some believed Dr. Harper was leveraging her wealth to meddle in departmental affairs. Others recognized that she was shining a long-overdue spotlight on a broken system. A few weeks later, Remington faced an internal disciplinary hearing. In a stark, wood-paneled room at CPD headquarters, he sat at a long table opposite investigators, union representatives, and departmental leadership. Dr. Mai. Harper attended as a witness, accompanied by Cassandra Liu. Press members were barred from the proceedings, but that didn't stop them from gathering outside, hoping to capture any updates or statements. The investigators presented a detailed timeline of Remington's confrontation with Dr. Harper, along with witness accounts from bystanders and the other officers involved. Videos taken by onlookers were played, showing Remington's hostile approach and Dr. Harper's calm demeanor. The footage displayed the moment he handcuffed her, ignoring her explanations and pleas for verification. Next, they introduced evidence of Remington's prior complaints, painting a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Remington's lawyer attempted to argue that Remington was doing his job, and that Dr. Harper's subsequent vindication didn't negate his initial, reasonable suspicion. But the panel wasn't swayed by the argument. The evidence was overwhelming, and the tone of each panel member made it clear they found his actions indefensible. Toward the end of the hearing, Dr. Harper was allowed to speak. She looked Remington in the eye, her voice unwavering. "I do not hate you, Officer Remington, but I despise what you stand for. I despise the abuse of power you so blatantly displayed. Your actions hurt not just me, but the trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. I hope the department learns from this incident and ensures no one else suffers because of prejudice." Remington seemed to shrink in his seat. His once haughty expression flickered with uncertainty and fear, as though he finally grasped the magnitude of his downfall. Within an hour, the panel deliberated and returned to the room. The verdict: termination from the Chicago Police Department, effective immediately. Moreover, the department recommended he be flagged for potential decertification, which would bar him from serving as a police officer elsewhere in the state. It was a rare and severe step, but the panel deemed it justified. When the door opened to let the public in, the tension hung thickly. A departmental spokesperson read the official statement. Officer Remington's conduct was found inconsistent with the values and policies of the Chicago Police Department. Effective immediately, he is discharged from duty, and further measures are under review. The swarm of reporters clamored for Dr. Harper's response. She kept it succinct. "Today is about accountability. I respect the department's decision. My hope is that we continue working toward true reform." In the aftermath of Remington's termination, discussions about racial profiling in law enforcement reached a fever pitch in Chicago. Activists hailed Dr. Harper's courage in using her platform to bring attention to the issue. City officials, now under a public microscope, committed to additional reforms beyond the new training program funded by Dr. Harper's donation. A citizen oversight committee was formed, composed of community leaders, legal experts, and representatives from civil rights organizations. Their mandate: to review officer misconduct cases with greater transparency and impartiality. National media outlets picked up the story, framing Dr. Harper as a symbol of both the frustration and the hope that Americans felt about policing. She was invited to speak on multiple talk shows, from local Chicago stations to national programs like CNN and MSNBC. Although reluctant to center herself in the media spotlight, her passion was philanthropic work, not personal celebrity. She accepted these invitations selectively to advocate for broader reforms. In an interview with Don Lemon on CNN, Dr. Harper spoke about the deeper implications of her case. "This isn't just about me. Countless people of color experience fear and harassment during police encounters, but they lack the resources or recognition to seek justice. We can't let racial profiling remain an open secret. It's time for collective accountability." Simultaneously, the philanthropic community watched in awe as Dr. Harper's foundation grew. She diverted more resources toward legal assistance for individuals who had experienced civil rights violations. Her resolve to protect the vulnerable only intensified. As for Officer Remington, losing his badge and paycheck was only the beginning. With multiple complaints coming to light, some victims considered filing civil suits against him personally. Lacking the protective shield of the department, Remington found himself grappling with both public disgrace and potential financial ruin. He also became a cautionary tale within the law enforcement community, an emblem of what could happen when prejudice collided with unchecked authority. Many quietly acknowledged that this was long overdue. Remington's karma had come full circle. Meanwhile, Dr. Harper's personal life settled into a newly invigorated routine. The Hunger Relief Initiative with Feeding America launched successfully, significantly reducing food shortages in several Chicago neighborhoods. Students at local schools cheered when Dr. Harper visited to talk about her journey, reminding them that perseverance and empathy were cornerstones of true success. The City Council, spurred by her philanthropic influence, passed new regulations to ensure continuous training on racial bias for all new police recruits. A portion of Dr. Harper's donation funded scholarships for those who wished to become social workers or mental health counselors embedded within police departments. It was a holistic approach, bridging law enforcement with community well-being. Dr. Harper also forged alliances with other influencers and celebrities who saw her as a leader in social justice philanthropy. The new synergy led to multiple collaborative projects beyond Chicago, initiatives aimed at police reform, community building, and job training in underserved regions nationwide. On a warm evening 6 months after the incident, Dr. Harper found herself back at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. This time, she was there to attend an award ceremony held in her honor. Feeding America, alongside various community organizations, was recognizing her for her extraordinary contributions to social justice and hunger relief. As she stood at the podium, a gentle hush fell over the banquet hall filled with donors, activists, and city officials. "Thank you," she began. "I'm humbled by this recognition, but true change isn't achieved by one person. It's the sum of all of us. The police officers who stand against prejudice, the city officials who champion reform, the activists who raise their voices, and the philanthropists who fund crucial projects. Together, we're building a community defined not by fear or mistrust, but by mutual respect and compassion." When she finished, the standing ovation was thunderous. Among the crowd were Officer Patel and Officer Martinez, who had come at her invitation. They clapped the loudest, grateful to be part of a positive transformation unfolding within their ranks. Outside the hotel, city lights gleamed off the surface of Lake Michigan. The night air felt soft against Dr. Harper's skin as she exited the banquet hall. Reflecting on the journey that had begun with a humiliating roadside confrontation, she recognized the unimaginable good that had since emerged. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was Chicago's story, a microcosm for the nation, reminding everyone that even in the face of injustice, hope could spark change, and that sometimes a painful, shocking event could be the catalyst for a brighter, more equitable future. And so ends the extraordinary saga of how a single encounter on a Chicago sidewalk triggered a tidal wave of accountability, hope, and reform. Imani Harper's unwavering resolve not only brought a racist cop to face the consequences of his actions, but also sparked transformative changes that continue improving lives throughout the community. Her story reminds us that courage, guided by empathy, can tear down walls of prejudice brick by brick, no matter how tall they loom. If this powerful account stirred you, spread the word. Share this video with friends, family, and anyone who believes in the triumph of justice. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of resilience, advocacy, and inspiration. And don't forget to like and leave a comment, tell us your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation about racial equality and accountability going strong. Together we make change possible.